Hello and welcome. You're watching the News Hour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. Today, we began the week on a disappointing note, especially when it comes to India's efforts to try and ramp up our supply of vaccines, especially on the part of states who so far had been told by the centre that 50% of the vaccines are being procured directly by it from manufacturers and are being distributed to states for the 45 and above category, but the rest of it, 25%, can be procured by the manufacturers. They can even float a global tender. Now, the hitch is that at least 2 such manufacturers abroad have made it clear that they do not want to have any direct dealings with states. They only want to negotiate. They only want to have a conversation with the union government. Soon after, Pfizer did say that they will eventually iron things out with the government of India, and the path would soon be created for the vaccines to reach India. But the point is that a lot of the hopes of the states who right now find a huge gap between their needs and the supply of vaccines, they were hoping to bridge this gap by getting vaccines directly from manufacturers, by floating these global tenders. After today's revelation, are we to believe that the very idea of these tenders, which have been floated by 8 states and at least 2 municipal corporations, is going to hit a dead end and is basically a non-starter?
फाइजर वाले कहते हैं जी आपको नहीं देंगे, हम केंद्र सरकार से बात करेंगे। हमारी मॉडर्ना से बात हुई, मॉडर्ना वाले कहते हैं जी हम आपको नहीं देंगे, हम केंद्र सरकार से बात करेंगे। केंद्र सरकार से हाथ जोड़ के अपील है कि हमारा देश ऑलरेडी काफ़ी समय लूज़ कर चुके हैं, हम लोग काफ़ी समय हो चुका है, तो अब हमें और समय नहीं गंवाना चाहिए। तो इनसे सबसे केंद्र सरकार बात करके केंद्र सरकार इनसे सारा इंपोर्ट करे और राज्यों के अंदर बांट दे।
चाहे फाइजर हो, मॉडर्ना हो, हम उन सबके साथ सेंट्रल लेवल से कोऑर्डिनेट करते हुए उनको 2 तरीके से फैसिलिटेट कर रहे हैं। एक तो उनके रेगुलेटरी फैसिलिटेशन इन टर्म्स ऑफ अप्रूवल्स, दूसरा प्रोक्योरमेंट रिलेटेड फैसिलिटेशन। और बोथ फाइजर एंड मॉडर्ना, मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम देयर ऑर्डर्स बुक्स इज ऑलरेडी फुल, तो इट इज डिपेंडिंग ऑन देयर सरप्लस हाउ मच दे कैन प्रोवाइड टू इंडिया। दे विल कम बैक टू गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एंड विल एंश्योर एंड फैसिलिटेट कि उसके बेसिस पर हम वो सारी चीजें स्टेट लेवल पर उसको सप्लाई किया जा सके, कोऑर्डिनेट किया जा सके, फैसिलिटेट कर पाए।
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
So where do we go from here? That and many other questions around India's vaccine strategy as of now. To answer that, the person best placed, Director AIIMS, Dr. Randeep Guleria, is joining us live. Sir, do you see this as a big blow, especially in the state's effort to try and procure vaccines directly from manufacturers abroad?
So in a way, it's the decision that manufacturers have to take whom they want to deal with. I don't see it as a big blow. I think in a way one could look at it as an advantage, because if you have the center which is able to deal with them and is able to get a larger number of doses, you'll be able to acquire it at a better deal and then be able to equitably distribute it to states as a decision that can be done. Whereas if you had to give it to different states, then there would be competition between states and it may not be equitable, and smaller states which may not have that much of capacity would actually lose out as compared to larger states. This may help in a more equitable distribution, but ultimately it's the decision of the manufacturers as to where they want to go.
But sir, then in that case, do you also lean towards the suggestion, which most states have been making, that centralized procurement is going to be a more sensible approach, especially since at the end of the day now we find that it is the center which is going to be negotiating with Pfizer and Moderna anyway?
So the center, I mean, this is for the center to decide, but can be the facilitator in terms of making sure that in terms of the rate, in terms of the procurement, in terms of the distribution, it can help. But ultimately, I suppose in terms of the payment part and making sure that it is distributed in the state in a uniform manner would be something that the states will have to decide. So it will have to be a balance between the state and the center. The center may be able to get a better deal in dealing with the international manufacturers, because obviously the number of doses that would be ordered would be much higher as compared to what each state would do that. And it would also be useful because it will help in distribution to all states in an equitable manner.
Dr. Guleria, a lot of people are very unclear about what the modalities of these global tenders even are. Now, it's been almost a month since Uttar Pradesh became the first state to invite bids directly from manufacturers. But can a state government go and seek bids from a company whose vaccine hasn't been cleared by the subject expert committee? Isn't that purely a domain of the center?
So I think what had been done by the regulatory authorities was that they had approved vaccines which had been given regulatory approval by the United States, by UK, by the European Union, by Japan or by WHO. So any of the vaccines which had been given approval were then indirectly, or let's say in an indirect manner, given approval by the Indian regulator also, that they would stand by that. And what we were asking previously was that you do bridging studies here, which was initially what was asked from Pfizer, was no longer needed, and therefore you could directly buy a vaccine which had these approvals from these regulatory authorities rather than having to do bridging trials in India.
So basically, any vaccine internationally that has been approved by the UK and the US regulator, and this would include Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, can directly be procured by the states. Is that the stand of the government now?
I think so. That's what the government has said, that if you have vaccines that have been approved by UK regulatory authorities, that's the FDA, by the European Union, by the UK regulatory authorities, by the Japanese authorities, or by WHO, then those can be directly procured and given given in India without having to go through any of the previous regulations and trials that were needed.
And they won't require to carry out any bridging studies either, if they manage to secure a contract from these companies.
Correct. So that was one of the mechanisms. So now my question is, sir,
we come to the issue.
So I was just saying that this is one of the mechanisms. This was one of the mechanisms which was being looked at to get more and more doses so that we could vaccinate a larger number of people as early as possible, till the time that we had large doses from both the Indian manufacturers, whether it be Covishield, Covaxin or Sputnik.
So then the question is that the issue of indemnity, which is what the government was quoting earlier as the reason for not accepting Pfizer. If a state was to go and secure a contract with Pfizer, for example, who would be bearing the outcome of that indemnity clause? Is the state empowered independently to grant indemnity to a manufacturer?
So I'm not the best person, but in my mind, I think that has to go through the center, and that's why the facilitation for all of this has to be possibly be done by the center, because if Pfizer wants an indemnity clause, then that will have to be for the whole country. It cannot be for one state and not for the other. So that, I think, will have to be done at a central level rather than a state level. And once that is done, then it can be further facilitated by the center.
So now a lot of states are asking the question, these things, for example, doing away with the bridging studies, ordering of advanced stocks, could that have been done sooner? Could that have been done in February itself? What was the thinking behind not adopting these same methods at the beginning of this year?
So that's retrospectively one could answer that this could have been done earlier. We could have also said that maybe even the Covishield, the AstraZeneca vaccine, could have been actually started way back in November, December, when it was approved by the UK regulators. But at that point in time, a lot of scientists were skeptical and said we need some data which is more looking at Indian patients, because you don't know whether there could be some ethnic variation or ethnic side effects which could happen. Remember, we did see reports of blood clotting happening in parts of Europe, especially Northern Europe, which was related to the Covishield vaccine. And when it was looked at in India, it was found that this is not that common in Indian population as it is in the Western population. So there are certain side effects which may be more ethnically related, and that is what was the concern at that point in time. Subsequently, when there was a large body of data, because these vaccines now have been used in millions of people globally, and many of them are Indians. And secondly, there was this urgency that we are having a huge surge in our number of cases because of the second peak. It was felt that we should now be more liberal and start trying to get more vaccines in, because the more people we vaccinate, the more protection we can give to our citizens and be able to prevent or break the chain of transmission and bring down the mortality. That was basically the philosophy which evolved over a period of time.
But without a bridging study, do we have data to suggest that Indians will not show adverse effects to these vaccines which have not been tested and tried on Indians?
So now there is a lot of data which has emerged. Remember, we have a large number of Indians settled in the UK, in the US. There's a very large Indian community. And if you really try and find out, a large number of them have been vaccinated. And the data which has emerged from that subpopulation does suggest that it's relatively safe. Although having said that, no one can really say about long-term side effects of any vaccine. After all, even the Covishield vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine, was approved initially, and the clotting side effects came many months later. But based on whatever data we have right now, it seems that these vaccines are also safe in the Indian population, because it has been used in a large number of Indians, both in the UK and in the US, without any significant side effects or red signals being picked up.
This is very important because this is not a detail that has been revealed earlier, Dr. Guleria. So could you please share, if you could elaborate further for our viewers, this is the main area of concern. How safe are these vaccines for us in India? What was the possible sample size that we've seen of the Indian population settled abroad? What was the nature of studies? Was there any adverse effect? If yes, what was its nature and what was its percentage? Could you share some of that data that you're talking about?
So this is not a study which has been done. It's an observation that one would have based on the number of people abroad who have got the vaccine, and you know that there are a significant percentage that would be Indians in that. And we haven't found any significant side effects being reported at all. That includes among various population, and that population is also of Indian origin. We have a large number of Indians in the UK who have been vaccinated. That is also there in the US. And we haven't really seen any reports saying that in some group there was a higher number of side effects. And therefore, it's probably worthwhile to assume that therefore the side effects in that population will not be less. It's not a study that has been done. It's like an observation that has been seen over months when the vaccine has been given to now millions of people across the globe, which was not the case if we go back 5 to 6 months ago, where the number of people vaccinated were much less.
Okay, another argument being advanced is that, like the US ordered in excess of 100 million doses per vaccine in the month of March itself, India did not go down that route because there was the fear that these vaccines would not be as effective against a mutation that we might see. Would you concur that that was one of the main reasons why procurement in bulk in advance wasn't done? Was that ever discussed by the government at that time?
I'm not aware whether it was discussed by the government, but I think let's look at any vaccine that you are going to get into the market. You're looking at 3 or 4 things. One is, of course, the fact that there is data to suggest that this vaccine is effective and it's safe. But along with that, you have to look at what is the manufacturing capacity that is there. And then what is the feasibility of rolling it out in your country. Remember, the first vaccine which came out, the Pfizer vaccine, it was to be kept at minus 70 degrees centigrade. There was no way that this vaccine could be rolled out in our country with the type of infrastructure that we have. Our vaccine program, which has been used for children and for pregnant women, looks at a vaccine for 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. Suddenly to start rolling out a vaccine in rural India or in small towns at minus 70 would not have been practical. Also, it was not a cost-effective vaccine. The cost of the vaccine being quoted by the company was much higher. And that is why I still feel that the vaccine which we have in India, both the Covaxin and the Covishield, are the vaccines which are there for the world. Majority of the world will need vaccines which are cost-effective, which can be used or which are feasible to use in local conditions at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade, whether we talk of Africa, we talk of Southeast Asia, or many parts of the world. So we have to look at not only the cost or the availability, but how practical are they to roll out in our country. And I think if you look at all of this, then what really fits the bill are the vaccines that are available in our country.
Now talking about the availability, you agree that at present there seems to be a gap in the need and the supply, because as opposed to what was projected at the beginning of May, in the last 10 days we have been able to administer only 1.57 million doses per day, as opposed to the beginning of the month where we were averaging 1.77 million doses per day. Is there a gap, and why is it there?
So I think it's very important that we understand, and this is something that we've been saying for a long time, although a lot of people, especially from the industry, were not willing to accept the fact, and they kept saying that the manufacturers are saying they have enough doses to vaccinate the entire country and that they will be able to provide enough doses to vaccinate everyone. But the maths was not there, and this is something we've said repeatedly, that if you do the maths between the supply and the demand, you will have to look at how you can open it up in a gradual manner. Opening it up at one time for everyone will create a shortage for some time, and I think this is going to last for another 4 to 6 weeks. By July, we should have enough doses coming in, both from the Indian manufacturers and possibly from outside, to be able to say that now we are in a comfortable position to be able to vaccinate the numbers that we need to do per day. But I do agree that at this point in time, we are in a little bit of a tight situation, and possibly it will be a limited vaccination that will continue for the next few weeks.
So are you suggesting that perhaps the math that the manufacturers gave to the government may have been a bit of an overstatement? Even today, for example, the Times of India quotes about how the manufacturers' own estimates are about how they will be producing 8 crore doses per month, just Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech together. But actually what we got is 5 crores this month. So where did the 3 crore go?
So you see, between the production and it coming into the market, sometimes there is a lot of evaluation which is done. The batch is evaluated. It's also proved to see that it is having the correct viability and the cold chain is maintained. So sometimes that delay can happen. But I do agree that we need to really look at it critically. From the manufacturer point of view, they would like to get as many orders as they can. But they are sometimes, you have to be practical about whether they can deliver on time or whether there's going to be a delay. In vaccines, you would not want to have a delay, but that happens globally, that sometimes vaccines get delayed. I remember that even for the AstraZeneca vaccine, which was to be supplied to Europe, because of some issues in the manufacturing plant, the European Union got vaccines which were delayed by a few weeks actually, because of circumstances which were unforeseen. So these are things which will happen and are part of the overall production and transport and availability.
Now, talking about Bharat Biotech, now the government said that we have got more PSUs to manufacture because it's an ICMR property. Why is it that so far only 2 PSUs, which is 2 companies, Hafkeen and Bharat Immunologicals, have been roped in? There is criticism that we've got at least a dozen other companies, existing facilities which are capable of manufacturing in Chennai and in other places. Why aren't they also being utilized?
So as far as I know, the government is keen to get as many manufacturers on board as possible. There are 2 or 3 things here. One is that the plant should be practical to do it. Making vaccines is a difficult issue in plants rather than making drugs. You could have a large number of drugs being made even in any plant, because that is simpler to do. But vaccines are more difficult to make, and the technology itself, the platform that you're using may be different, and that has to be available there. Remember, now we are using almost 5-6 platforms in our own country. We have the inactivated virus platform, which is Bharat Biotech's. The Serum Institute uses a different platform. It uses the viral vector platform. There are mRNA vaccines which are being made. There is a DNA vaccine which Zydus is making. So each plant is making a different type of vaccine using a different platform. Now you can't really change that dramatically to make another platform vaccine. So that is why it needs to be looked at more critically from the point of view of whether it's feasible in that manufacturing plant, how much of the change is required in that plant to really start now changing the technology, and what are the number of doses that you will get out of this after doing all of these changes
So
and
if I may
manipulations.
interrupt you, how long does it ordinarily take to adapt a plant for vaccine production?
So I'm not the best person, but I know that it can take about 2 to 3 months, because sometimes the whole plant has to be really looked at in a different manner. You have certain plants which can easily adapt depending on the vaccine that they're using. If they're using the similar platform, and there are vaccine plants which are now coming up because they're using the same platform which Bharat Biotech is using, but there are other vaccine plants which are using different vaccine platforms. Secondly, I think it's also important to remember that we should not forget that we also have a vaccine program for children and for pregnant women. We can't stop vaccinating children and pregnant women at the same time and not have vaccines available for them, because preventing disease in them is also an important part. So this has to be balanced between that part also.
Now, there was a lot of skepticism about why India increased the gap between two doses, especially since just 24 hours after we increased the gap to 16 weeks for Covishield, UK actually reduced it from 12 weeks to 8 weeks. So if it's effective 8 weeks for the UK, why are we keeping it at 16 weeks?
So I'm not able to really understand why the UK did it, but I think there is science behind what was done as far as India is concerned. And it took some time for us, I would say the group, the committee which is looking into it, I'm not a part of that, to really become comfortable with the science behind it. And this is based on publications which appeared in the last few months, in early this year and in the month of February and March. And what they really showed was that what UK did was that it did a little bit of an experiment. They had no idea at that point in time in December. But because of the surge in the cases that they had, they decided to delay the second dose, not only of the AstraZeneca vaccine, but even for Pfizer. And both these vaccines were given at 12 weeks' time. But what they found with the AstraZeneca vaccine was 2 or 3 things. One was that if you give one dose, does this give you a good amount of protection? And what they found was that even if you got one dose, the degree of protection was to the tune of around 71%, which was acceptable. Secondly, they found that if you were to vaccinate early, say around the 4th week, the immunity that you were getting was only around 55 to 60%. But if you delayed the second shot from the 4th week to the 12th week, the immunity that you got was going up to the tune of 81 to 85%. Therefore, it seemed to make sense to them, and this was published in the paper in Lancet, that if you delay the second shot, you get more shots which you can give to the population. The people who have got one shot are protected, and those who get the second shot get a good immune response. As a matter of fact, there are now studies which are coming up which are even trying to suggest that even if you further delay the second shot, you may even get a better immune response. So I think we really are learning more and more as far as the vaccines are concerned, and possibly we haven't got the last word has not been said for any vaccine as of now.
So there could be further delays. From 16 weeks, you may increase it even further to maybe 20 weeks or more.
If the data emerges like that, some people actually theoretically argue that maybe if we delay it for 4 to 6 months, we get a better immune response. We don't have enough data, but that is something which is being looked at.
Last 2 questions I want to ask you, Dr. Guleria. One, when we are allowing Pfizer without bridge studies in India, as long as they get regulation, as they're approved by regulators in the US and UK, will we also extend that to the vaccination of children? Because the same vaccine is being used in the US to vaccinate children.
So I'm not aware of whether that decision has been taken by the group or not. But in the long run, I think that decision will also be taken, because once there is good, robust data, then the same will hold true for what was done for adults. And I think that should be also applicable to children. Also, the trials for the Indian vaccine, Bharat Biotech has already started the trials for vaccinating children between the age of 2 to 18 years. and I'm hopeful that in the next 3-4 months they'll have enough data for us to really be comfortable with vaccinating children also. So hopefully by that time we should be able to vaccinate or start vaccinating children.
Okay, interesting, because a lot of examinations, etc., would be hinging on that. My final question to you, the latest scare is white fungus and yellow fungus. Is there any data to suggest that these are some variants of the black fungus that has already been notified under the Epidemic Act?
So I think we need to really start talking of the name of the fungus rather than giving them colors, and because that can vary depending on which part of the body they are seen in, and therefore even mucormycosis is not classically under the label of black fungus scientifically. It's usually grows on cultures as a white colored cotton type of a fungus with black dots on it, like pepper being spilled over it, and it's not actually a black fungus. Some people would argue that white fungus is another fungus by the name of Candida because it causes white coating of the tongue and the oropharynx. But I think it's better rather to talk of what is the name of the fungus rather than giving it colors, because the same thing can cause great amount of confusion. As of now, majority of the data suggest that this is mucormycosis. There are occasional cases that we see of two other fungi, that is Candida and Aspergillosis. But this is what we're trying to see, and these are known to be more common in people whose immunity is suppressed, even in the pre-COVID era.
All right. For now, thank you very much, Dr. Randeep Guleria, for taking all of those questions, and hopefully that should soothe a lot of anxieties that people have, especially about our vaccine program. Thank you very much.